All right. Hi, everyone. So as you're joining me this afternoon, I invite you just to drop into the chat and let me know where you're joining from. I always love to see where people are joining in from. Great. Seeing lots of different locations around the US, which is awesome. So I want to start by saying congratulations on being here this afternoon. I really appreciate you taking an hour or so of your time to stay with me. We're going to be going through a lot of really awesome information, and I'm hoping to really open your eyes to some new concepts that you haven't come across before and share with you some pretty exciting stories along the way. I also want to make this very interactive. So please, as we go through this process, I encourage you to post questions in the chat. There's also a Q&A button at the very top of your screen that you can put questions in, and then they'll show up anonymously. And I'd be more than happy to answer those if I catch them as we go through or at the very end. So let me start by saying that you are absolutely in the right place if you have been struggling with your gut health or autoimmune disease at any point in the last several months or years. I'm guessing that you've already been to a functional or a conventional doctor and become very frustrated because you haven't gotten the help that you wanted. And I'm sure you've tried a lot of things on your own to resolve your symptoms. I want you to know that if you've already been to a handful of practitioners and you feel like you've just been given the runaround, you're in the right place. If you've spent countless hours on Google researching your symptoms, if you're part of multiple Facebook groups centered around your illness and you're asking tons of questions, you're in the right place. You might be confused about which foods might be making you worse and want to know more about which foods to focus on to make you feel better. You are in the right place. If you've been prescribed meds and supplements and you feel like nothing's really helped you get your health back in the way you wanted, you are in the right place. And if you feel like you've really not found a practitioner that's been able to help you get to the root cause of your illness, you are absolutely in the right place. My goal this afternoon is to provide you with a lot of really great information and get you off on the right foot if you haven't been able to make progress with your health so far. I'll be sending out a replay, but I also encourage you to take notes as we go along this afternoon. So I will be covering 3 key questions and the answers I feel you need to know to give your gut healing a head start. I'm also going to be busting some common myths about the origins of IBS, IBD, and gut symptoms in general. And I'm going to be offering you some simple strategies you can implement in your very own kitchen to improve your gut health. So who am I? Let me start by giving you a quick introduction on me. My name is Courtney Cowie. I'm a nutrition therapy practitioner and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, meaning I have 2 degrees in functional medicine and nutrition. I'm also trained in Chinese medicine as a body worker and an herbalist. And so I kind of incorporate all of this into my work with clients. I specialize, though, in helping clients who have been struggling with chronic gut and autoimmune conditions, who have become frustrated with conventional medicine and want real answers and true solutions for why they are struggling. I work from a functional medicine approach, which means that I see all aspects of the body as interconnected when it comes to determining health. I also work from the perspective that all gut dysfunction falls on an autoimmune spectrum and that all autoimmune disease has underlying gut dysfunction. I'll explain that more as we go through the presentation this afternoon. But my approach really centers around identifying the key factors disrupting and dysregulating both the gut and the immune system, which are also at the root of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So who are the people that I help? Let me share with you Linda's story. Linda was a client that came to me after she had been to her conventional GI doctor and was experiencing some upper GI symptoms. And he did testing on her and he diagnosed her with an H. pylori infection, which is a type of bacteria that can overgrow in the stomach. So he offered her some antibiotics. She took this round of antibiotics, didn't feel much better, and went back to the doctor for more help. So her doctor was able to identify a problem for her, but the solution he offered her didn't work. And the next solution he wanted to offer her was actually doing another round of antibiotics in combination with 2 different antibiotics. So she really didn't want to go down that path because she knew that this would be harmful to her gut and potentially cause other unwanted side effects. effects. And she was also leaning more towards looking for a solution that would be complete enough to cover all the bases and actually work for her, and an approach that would support her body to basically clear this infection on its own without creating more issues or side effects along the way. And this is exactly what I was able to offer her through my Tame Your Gut program. I was able to provide her with comprehensive support that actually effectively helped her body clear the infection, as well as taught her how to eliminate her symptoms and support lasting gut healing through diet change so that this infection wouldn't come back and become a problem for her again. So not only did she clear the infection, she minimized her symptoms and she learned how to maintain her gut health through the work we did together. This is what Linda said. Hi, Courtney, great news. My H. pylori test came back yesterday as negative. Your recommendations worked. I'm so glad I trusted the process. Thank you. I want to tell you about Jamie. She came to me with a different case. She was desperate for help with her daughter, Tegan. So Jamie is actually trained as a nurse and is well-versed in conventional medicine, has worked in the field for many, many years. And by the time she came to me, she had already run the gamut of blood work and tons of doctor's visits to figure out what was causing her daughter's spaciness, unusual fatigue, and concentration issues. She had already been to numerous doctors over the course of many months, only to be told that everything was normal. Now, despite being trained as a nurse, deep down, Jamie knew that something just wasn't right with this whole outcome. She told me, you know, Tegan can't even finish brushing her teeth without multiple reminders every single night. She also falls asleep in the car on the way home from school. I just don't think that this is normal. And so I explained to Jamie that the kind of testing that I would run as part of my Tame Your Gut program was different than the blood work that her doctor had already done. I told her the tests I run are looking for root cause factors and imbalances that correlate with Tegan's symptoms. And once we figure those out, that gives us a plan to get her health back on track. So Jamie opted her and Tegan into the program. And sure enough, we found evidence that there was certain pathogenic bacteria overgrowing in Tegan's gut, which also meant that Tegan was there's a high probability that she was dealing with a lot of food sensitivities as well. The beautiful part is the program they went through not only gave them a plan to address the imbalances in Tegan's gut, it also gave them a nutritional plan to address the food sensitivities and regain healthy function. Within a matter of days of starting, Jamie had her daughter back. Let me have Jamie tell you a bit about her process in her own words.
Hello, my name is Jamie, and this is Tegan. I wanted to give a shout out and testimonial to Courtney Cowley. I've been a patient of Courtney's, started with her body work, and was having some of my own health issues. And it hit me one day that I needed to get my little Tegan here assessed. So I did a discovery call with Courtney. Since the age, well, approaching 3 years old. How old are you? 6. So approaching 3 years old, we started to notice some interesting behaviors, staring off into the distance, not really staying on track, not staying focused, following more than one step of a direction was kind of a challenge. And we found ourselves getting more and more frustrating. And I went through all the conventional means of trying to get an answer because this just wasn't normal, despite the fact that I was being told that it was normal. You should always go with your mom gut, right? So I met with Courtney and I was like, oh, you have to assess. Can we do a discovery call on my little Tegan here? So long story short, we have seen night and day difference with Tegan, and I can't thank Courtney enough for her knowledge, her deep wealth of education, and the solution-driven mindset that she has. And Tegan is feeling so much better. We implemented our strategy and our diet changes almost immediately, and we noticed within 2 days a huge difference. Her attention, her focus, her following direction, right? Popping out of bed, just rocking the days. Yeah, she's super excited about that. We are commending and giving her lots of kudos for that. And she feels better. Does your belly hurt anymore?
No.
Her belly does not hurt anymore. We actually didn't know her belly was hurting. She was just dealing with this for years. And then came home from school one day and said, Mom, my belly didn't hurt today. So that was pretty incredible. And that was 4 days after implementing the change. So if anybody is looking for fingers, oh my gosh, if anyone is looking for any, you're at a dead end and you need help and some answers, I think that Courtney is your gal, and I would highly recommend her to anybody.
All right, so these client stories really resonate with me because I work with and hear about similar struggles from a variety of people on a daily basis. And also because I had my own frustrating and complex story of my own health journey. So my own personal struggle is what launched me into becoming a functional medicine practitioner and developing a process that would really help people regain their health. My struggle goes all the way back to childhood as an IBS issue. And I was a pretty active kid, enjoyed sports, always thought of myself as healthy, but it was not unusual for me to come home from school a couple times a week with a stomach ache. And I would put a pillow under my stomach for about 20 minutes, feel better, get up and go on with my day. And my family was aware of this, but they sort of wrote this off as normal for me throughout childhood. As I grew up and went on to college, I competed in rowing, distance running, got into triathlon, and became more interested in nutrition because of my athletic background. I had actually been experimenting with vegetarianism since high school. And I remember being in graduate school and deciding to dabble with a raw foods diet for a period of time. And I found a couple of days into this experiment that I was waking up and having diarrhea several times in the morning. And so of course I quickly gave this up because that was awful. The symptoms went away, but I feel like that little window of experimentation sort of foreshadowed some of the struggles that were to come for me later on down the road. As I approached my mid-20s, little by little, I was noticing I was having more fatigue. I was having regular periods of depression. I was starting to experience regular bouts of loose stool. It wasn't until I was almost 30 and my irregular bowels started to interfere with my ability to exercise that I first went in to see a GI doctor. So of course she did the full workup, including an upper endoscopy, a lower colonoscopy. I was told nothing abnormal was found, and I was given the diagnosis of IBS-D and sent home with a recommendation to try an over-the-counter probiotic. So things got better and stabilized for a while after that first colonoscopy. But a few years after that, I felt like things really took a major downturn in my gut health. And it wasn't until I did a second colonoscopy several years later that I discovered I had collagenous colitis. But this period of time, a few years after that first colonoscopy, was likely the true start of that in terms of my autoimmune struggle. So this flare happened during a really rough time in my life when I was building my practice as a massage therapist. I was raising my son as a single mom. I remember waking up one morning and feeling like I had a terrible stomach flu. I had to run to the bathroom upwards of like 8 times that day. And things were so bad as that went on over the course of days and weeks. I remember just having tons of anxiety about leaving the house and not being near a bathroom. The symptoms were just unrelenting and they went on for months. I did a lot of my own research on diet. I removed a lot of the obvious food triggers I had read about, and I still continued to suffer. I remember actually getting worried about making it through my work day with clients without having sudden bathroom interruptions and just how anxiety provoking that was. And secondarily, I was dealing with a lot of really extreme fatigue to the point where I'd have to have a cup of coffee right after lunch to power through my afternoon. So for me, hitting rock bottom was when I went back to that original GI doctor who did my first colonoscopy, and she looked me in the eye with annoyance and exasperation. And she basically told me she felt my IBS-D diagnosis explained what was going on with me and that I really just needed to see a dietitian. So I left her office and I had a breakdown in my car because on the one hand, I was so angry at her refusal to look deeper. But on the other hand, I finally had to accept that I needed to take things into my own hands and go a different route to get the answers I was looking for. So this was when I began to get interested in functional medicine, which looks at the organs and systems of the body as one interconnected network. The functional medicine approach of looking for root causes versus band-aiding symptoms made perfect sense to me. So I started to see different functionally trained practitioners who were able to get me started down the path of health. However, even with this help, I wasn't achieving true resolution in my symptoms. One thing you should know about me is that I'm a very determined soul and I don't give up easily. Maybe because of my athletic background, I don't know. But because I had a strong interest in becoming an expert in nutrition, I decided to go down the rabbit hole and become trained as a nutrition therapy practitioner. And this actually out to be the first real turning point in my health because I was finally able to dial in my diet and remove all the foods I was reacting to in order to eliminate my symptoms. Now, this wasn't the end of my health journey, but the process of studying functional medicine and getting 2 credentials in the field of nutrition, as well as learning to understand and deal with a whole host of complex factors playing into my own gut health struggle, is what led me to develop my Tame Your Gut program. So this journey ultimately got my gut function and my life back, and it left me with feeling again like I could be the kind of mom I wanted to be to my kids, and also serve as a guide to help others regain their gut health from a person who truly lived it and went to the ends of the earth to study all of the different contributors to gut dysfunction. And ultimately, it got me to a place where I was able to finally start living the life that I wanted to be living. So this is really the goal that I have for you too. I want you to get your life back, to feel good in your own skin again, to help you resolve your symptoms so that you can take on your responsibilities without this constant worry and struggle of your symptoms. I want you to know that recovering your health naturally takes time, but it's possible. And so my goal is to provide you with some knowledge today that you didn't have coming into the presentation, knowledge that I wish I had when I was at the beginning of my health struggles. I also hope that you come out of this presentation seeing a new potential for yourself to become a healthier, happier version of you. And I'll be offering you hope through several client stories that I'll share with you throughout this webinar, just like Jamie and Tegan's story. So before we get into that key information I have to share with you, I want to again just acknowledge why you're here. Maybe you've hit rock bottom like I did, and you're here because you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor. If this is the case, I know you're here because you're serious about and committed to finally resolving your chronic gut or autoimmune symptoms. You're here because you're tired of living with food consequences and symptoms because you're eating the wrong foods. You're here because you've been struggling with sudden bathroom runs, maybe even pregnancy-like bloating, stomach cramping, nausea, reflux, and sleep disruption because of all the gut stuff, right? And you're here because you're struggling with a lot of exhaustion and fatigue, and probably even things like depression and anxiety, because all of these symptoms go hand in hand with a picture of chronic gut struggle. So if any of these bullet points resonate with you, you are at the best possible place to learn how to regain your health through a functional medicine approach. I also want to state a very important disclaimer, and that is the model of health I'm about to tell you about is not the same as conventional medicine, and it isn't well suited for people attracted to that style of healthcare. This means that it's really not for you if you're looking for a magic bullet or a quick fix or even a DIY solution. It's really not for you if you're not interested in a comprehensive and a holistic solution that goes beyond just finding and taking supplements, right? And it's not for you if you're not willing to commit a certain amount of resources, time, and energy to implementing a tailored gut healing program and developing new lifestyle and thought habits that serve health. So my big promise to you is that by the end of this webinar, I will have answered 3 key questions I believe are critical to achieving lasting gut health. And I'm also going to be offering you the opportunity to have a complimentary one-on-one Zoom consultation with me. That being said, let's dive in. So key question number 1, what are the real triggers and causes of chronic gut symptoms and autoimmunity? So with this question, I wanted to dispel some of the common false triggers and myths that people diagnosed with gut conditions and autoimmune disease are often told. And these are often the primary reasons why people get frustrated with seeing conventional doctors and they start to look for another approach that helps them get to the root cause. I want to give you insight on how a functional medicine approach investigates and identifies root causes and talking about some real triggers. So starting with some of the false triggers for people who are struggling with gut and autoimmune conditions, I've got a list of them here, and I'll just start by saying these are some of the same things that I was told when I was a patient seeing conventional doctors. And I want to point out that these reasons often serve as the basic first-line therapy for IBS and IBD when a person first visits their GI doc for the first time and starts down that path of getting that diagnosis. So let's take these one at a time. So first and foremost, people are often told they have the wrong genetics or they have this illness because it runs in their family, kind of playing into the whole idea that your genes dictate your disease. And I want to say that's absolutely not true. There's a field called epigenetics that's really come to the forefront over the last decade or two. And this was pioneered by the work of Bruce Lipton, who authored the book, The Biology of Belief. He's got a PhD in this field of research and has done a lot of really deep, interesting studies on this whole area of what turns genes on. But suffice it to say that in less than 1% of all cases of illness, can you say that genes are the primary cause of that? In 99% plus of all cases of illness, but especially IBS and autoimmune disease, there are triggers from the outside environment that are acting on these genes to turn them on to get that illness to express, which actually is very hopeful if you understand that mechanism, because as much as you can intervene to turn a gene on, you can intervene to turn a gene off. And so the hope in that lies in the fact that you're not stuck with this condition because of your genetics for life. You have all the potential in the world to actually work from an outside in influence perspective to actually mitigate that gene expression and turn those bad genes back off. Secondly, people are often told that they're eating a lot of high FODMAP foods and that might be causing their symptoms. So if you're unfamiliar with the term FODMAP, let me just explain that. This stands for fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharide, and polyol. And these are special sugar components of carbohydrates that are highly fermentable by certain bacterial species in the gut. And often GI docs will recommend as a starting line dietary intervention that people go on what's called a low FODMAP diet. So to this point, I want to say that high FODMAP foods in and of themselves don't cause things like diarrhea, bloating, or constipation. It's actually reactions to these FODMAPs that are secondary to deeper underlying root cause imbalances in the gut that we need to discover. So even though removing high FODMAP foods might help in some select cases with certain clients, I've actually found that in most cases, eating a low FODMAP diet alone is not enough to resolve symptoms. A much more comprehensive dietary strategy is often required, along with deeper investigation into underlying issues in the gut. In fact, I've actually found that once we start to heal the gut and restore the health of the microbiome, tolerance to FODMAP starts to come back for many clients. Thirdly, people are often told that they've got these issues and these symptoms because they're not eating enough fiber. And this is probably the one myth of the four I've listed here that still is the hardest one for me to bust for my clients, even the ones I've been working with for a while, because we're just so inundated with this message from both conventional doctors, but also mainstream marketing and media, right? But what's interesting about that is if you actually really look at the studies on fiber, most of them done are epidemiological, which means that the outcomes are often confounded by other factors. So when they're looking at a population, they're studying dietary habits and they're looking at, say, fiber, they're not taking into consideration that the same population might have higher socioeconomic status. They might be better educated. They might already be doing self-care practices like yoga and exercising. They might be spending more time outdoors. They might be sleeping more at night. They might be avoiding cigarettes. They might be, no drinkers, right? There's all these different lifestyle factors that can play into population studies that if the study isn't framed properly can make it really difficult to draw direct correlations or connections between the factors studied and the actual outcome. This is something that Dr. Paul Saladino talks a lot about in his work as well, but it's just something to really note and think about with regards to the fiber piece. I'll actually be doing a Facebook Live on this entire topic in upcoming weeks in my Facebook group, so stay tuned for that. But I want to also just mention one more thing. Prior to World War II, there was a holistic dentist named Weston A. Price that actually traveled the world, and he was very interested in studying different native populations right at the time when processed foods were starting to make their way into the diet of these people. And so a lot of these different populations of people were more remotely located. So for example, he looked at the Eskimos in Alaska, and they actually eat a very low fiber diet traditionally because they eat mostly whale blubber, as well as looked at some of the tribes people that live on the Saharan plains of Africa who have more plant matter in their diet, so presumably more fiber in their diet. And if we take those two examples comparatively, what he actually found was that there was no difference at all in their health outcomes, both in their dental health and their overall health. Really, what did correlate with changes in health was how much of their diet had been infiltrated by processed foods. And so in every population he looked at, the older generations that had grown up on the native whole foods based local diet, the health of those people was immaculate. But the younger generations that were starting to eat things like breads and, processed products made from refined flours, he was starting to see more dental cavities, changes in their bone structure, just less sturdier frames. Overall, he was starting to note significant signs of degeneration. And so his work even today is seminal in the field of functional medicine. It's really great work that kind of correlates how important the quality of diet is to how healthy a person is. But with regards to fiber, it really didn't show there was any kind of benefit whatsoever, irregardless of whether there was a lot of fiber or a little fiber in the diet of these native people. Now, lastly, people are often told that they've got IBS or autoimmune disease because it's just a fluke. It's just bad luck. It's just random. And I think often this comes from just conventional doctors not having a lot of tools from which to draw from to look for deeper causes. But I also think it comes from wanting to offer the Band-Aid solution of medications. Either way, being told that it's a matter of bad luck completely takes your control as a patient out of your hands and puts it kind of outside of you and leaves you feeling victimized. And what I'm going to do is show you in just a moment that there are definite factors that contribute to chronic gut dysfunction and autoimmune disease. And once you understand those, this puts the responsibility back into your own hands, and it empowers you to take steps to get your health back. So I'd invite you to type a yes into the chat if any of these points resonate with you, if you've been told some of these same things, maybe after seeing a conventional GI doctor. And if there's anything else that comes to mind, maybe you've been in and you've been told something else, I'd invite you to share that with me in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about some of the root cause factors that functional medicine considers when someone's struggling with gut or autoimmune dysfunction. So in most cases, it's usually one or more of these factors in combination that results in this expression of IBS, IBD, autoimmune disease. It's not necessarily just one thing. So I'll put that out there just to start with. But again, let's go through these one by one. So first and foremost, a history of antibiotic overuse. I feel this is one of the most missed, but often most common factors in the population of people struggling with gut health conditions. And this is simply because antibiotics are so overprescribed and because most of us have grown up taking them here and there, whether it was for ear infections as children, acne as teenagers, or sinus infections as adults. We often don't realize how much damage these ongoing hits of antibiotics are doing over the course of a person's life. And every time you take a round of antibiotics, it's going to be killing off your body's beneficial bacteria that was inoculated at birth. And these are not easy to replace strains. And so time and time again, what can happen is the microbiome gets less and less diverse, more and more depleted, which absolutely sets the stage for problems like IBS. So this is a big, big deal. Secondly, a condition called leaky gut is another huge underlying factor in IBS, IBD, and autoimmune disease. And this might be a term you've heard of, but in case you haven't, let me just explain it quickly. Leaky gut is what happens when openings are created in the lining of the small intestine that allow food particles to leak through the gut directly into the bloodstream, activating the immune system. And so when this type of condition sets in, this is a process that will happen repeatedly every time an individual eats. Especially certain foods are more prone to create this type of phenomenon. But what can happen is that over time, the immune system now gets trained to start attacking these foods. And what will happen is it'll cross-correlate some of the proteins in these foods with different tissues and organs of the body, because believe it or not, there's similarity in food protein structures and our body's own tissues and organs. And so this actually will start to lay the groundwork for the immune system to start to turn on the body itself and mount an attack erroneously, right? This is one of the key foundational, prerequisites of autoimmune disease. And I won't get too deep into leaky gut just right now, but I want to mention it. And I want to say that there's a lot of upstream dysfunctions and deficiencies that lead to leaky gut. But the number one thing that absolutely contributes is a poor diet consisting of processed and inflammatory foods. And once you have leaky gut, it will not only create more autoimmune disease and more GI symptomology, but then that GI symptomology in autoimmune disease often makes inflammation in the gut 10 times worse. And then when inflammation goes up, more leaky gut happens. So there's kind of this round robin problem that happens with leaky gut, which is why it's such a big deal to assess for this and to fix it or work to reverse it, right? Thirdly, insufficient digestive juices are very, very, very common with gut conditions. I've actually found in working with all of my clients, this is right up there. And I can't think of a single person who hasn't had this factor as part of their picture. So what does that mean exactly? Well, you have upper GI organs, namely the stomach, the pancreas, and the liver, that are tasked with producing different fluids to help you break your food down. And what can happen is, for a variety of reasons, these organs get weak, there's deficiencies in the body or in the digestive system, or sometimes there's just other factors that are leading into these weaknesses, right? That cause these organs to underproduce these fluids, or sometimes the quality of these fluids is just not great. And so when that happens, food is not getting broken down properly at the level of the upper GI, which means that maldigested food will start to make its way through the intestines time and time again. And what this will do is create this environment in the small intestine in particular for the wrong types of bacteria to take up residence and start to flourish. What it will also do often is encourage bacteria that should normally live in the colon to actually migrate up into the small intestine and start to live there, which will cause all of those IBS symptoms that you are likely struggling with, whether it's bloating, gassiness, diarrhea, constipation, stomach pain, etc. And so this is a big thing that we want to look at. And I have ways that I assess for this with my clients right up front when they start to work with me. And then toxins are an important additional final trigger, and these come from both the environment around us as well as from pathogens that are living in our system. So after hitting gut infections, toxins are hands down the biggest contributor to immune dysregulation and, I would say, gut dysfunction that I see. Any unusual accumulation of toxins in the body can lead to digestive system breakdown and dysfunction. For example, a biotoxin like mold actually can create leaky gut by producing mycophenolic acid, which suppresses the immune system and degrades the lining of the gut, which can lead to this leaky gut exacerbation. I actually get into the whole realm of toxins and how they impact the gut in a lot of detail in my Tame Your Gut program, but we really do need to assess for toxins if you're dealing with ongoing autoimmune or gut symptoms, because they're so common in this population. So I'm going to have my team drop some links to studies that support these actual triggers and the data I was just presenting you, in case this is something that you want to look into more on your own free time. And just to highlight how important this first question is and how important it is to get to the root cause in order to resolve your symptoms, I'd like to tell you about my client, Therese. Therese struggled with psoriasis and skin rashes her entire life due to an overactive immune system. And prior to enrolling in my program, the best solution she was offered by doctors was prednisone, which is a common steroid, and then other steroids to control her flares. And like so many of the clients that have come to me to work with me, she preferred a natural approach to resolving her symptoms. And she'd done a lot of her own research on diet and supplements. But she realized that trying to DIY it just really wasn't working very well. And she still continued to struggle with embarrassing rashes and breakouts and itchy skin. So let me have Therese tell you what her experience going through my program was like. Okay, Therese, I'm going to ask you a few questions about our work together. So what were your biggest health challenges that drew you to working with me in nutrition?
It started out with psoriasis. It's pretty uncontrollable on my scalp, itchy, flaky. Just my whole life for 40 years, I struggled with psoriasis until I found Courtney.
And so on a scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being terrible, how bad was it when we first started together?
Oh, probably between a 7 and an 8. There were periods where I would have flares and it would be worse, but it was pretty much always at a 7 or 8.
Okay. And then what do you think was most helpful for you during the time we worked together and you were doing nutrition therapy and functional medicine?
Most helpful was, I think, just being aware of how the things that you eat and the choices that you make affect your health and just your whole life. So it helped me be better aware of making good choices.
Okay, so you felt like the education you got was really helpful just in general.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then specifically, what gains or improvements have you witnessed in the time we've worked together, specific to your skin especially?
Well, we did a 10-week, we called it a kill protocol in the very beginning. And after those 10 weeks, my psoriasis was completely gone for the first time in 40 years. So that was huge for me, not to wake up every day and be itching and scratching and miserable.
Awesome. And do you feel like if you had to kind of rate where you're at now, because I know there's still a little bit of ups and downs because sometimes dealing with autoimmune disease can be a little bit of a lifelong process, what kind of number on a scale of 0 to 10 would you give it right now?
Well, I'm probably down in the 1 to 2. My skin has never been 100% clear. There's always a little spot here or a little spot there, but it's so minimal that it doesn't affect my life like it did before I found Courtney.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, so the real success in this story was Therese gaining the knowledge and the education she was lacking around diet to maintain her health on her own. No one up until she began to work with me was able to offer her a solution to this core problem that was keeping her stuck in an endless cycle of skin flares. So let's move on to key question number 2. Which is how can I resolve chronic gut and autoimmune symptoms? Now that we've talked about the importance of being able to identify root causes versus, fake causes, so to speak, let's talk about incomplete versus viable approaches we can take to resolve symptoms. So let's start with the incomplete solutions list. And I'm going to give you a short list of some of these incomplete solutions. And these are things that, again, are often offered up by doctors or quick fix marketers. And I'm going to briefly explain why these approaches don't work well for chronic gut and autoimmune conditions. So first on the list, not surprisingly, are drugs. And I'm guessing you're here this afternoon because you've already tried this and you've had frustrations or felt terrible on them, or deep down know that this is not really a true solution to your issue. We know that drugs are just a symptom band-aid, and often if they do work or work at all, it's through artificially inducing actions on the body's nervous and immune systems that modulate how the body would normally behave. And you know that most of the time you yank the drug, the symptoms come right back, and that's kind of a validation of the impact that they're having, right? So most of the drugs prescribed for IBS involve antispasmodic or motility promoting or slowing drugs, depending on if you're diarrhea or constipation predominant. And they often don't work super well. At least that's been my experience and what I've found in working with clients. For inflammatory bowel disease or other autoimmune conditions, people are often given steroid-based medications or immunosuppressive medications, which again can sometimes help or can be useful to flare maybe or stop a really bad flare in the beginning. But over the long haul, there's a lot of unfortunately bad side effects that can come with these drugs. And then sometimes even people just have mixed results. They're not really working all that great, and they have to be changed up every so often because the body adapts to the effects of the drugs, which is not a fun process to go through. I think that most of you are here because you intuitively sense that drugs are not really correcting the underlying problem, and you're really looking for a deeper root cause, right? If we look at number 2, over-the-counter probiotics, this is often a very basic starting point that a GI doctor will recommend to most patients as well. And I will say it can sometimes be helpful if you're one of those lucky people that takes a probiotic and that corrects all of your IBS. Well, you probably aren't on the webinar this afternoon. In my experience, this is not usually a full solution for people. Let's just talk a bit about probiotics in general and sort of what is their potential to help the gut. So research actually shows that the health of the microbiome is actually a reflection of the health of the person, meaning that the microbiome is actually coming along for the ride as a result of health, not because probiotics specifically were given to try to reshape the microbiome, because we're talking about a therapy that goes literally down into the gut to try to repopulate or recondition the microbiome. And so the question is, well, how effective are probiotics at doing that? I've actually found that many individuals do worse on most probiotics, especially in the beginning, because there's other underlying issues going on in their gut that need to be discovered and addressed first. So because of this, diet actually has been shown to have greater impact on the health of the microbiome. Secondly, if you do choose to work with a probiotic, the effectiveness of it really depends on many different things. First and foremost, the quality of the probiotic. The one you pick up at Walgreens is not going to be the same guaranteed therapeutic quality as the one you would get from a functional medicine practitioner that sources their probiotics directly from a research-based company that only sells to licensed healthcare providers, right? Also the presence of secondary underlying gut infections can very much determine how helpful a probiotic is. If there's a lot of underlying gut infections, I don't often expect the probiotic to do a whole lot in terms of taming symptoms. The health of the gut lining also matters. The probiotic has to be able to embed into the lining of the gut. And if there just isn't a good lining to do that, that can impact overall the effectiveness of that probiotic. It's like planting seeds in your garden. If you have terrible soil, what is the potential of those seeds to really thrive and flourish, right? And then lastly, the ability of the probiotic to outcompete other bad gut bugs. And again, this kind of comes back to a quality issue, but a lot of this just depends on other factors and how resilient and virulent those other strains of bacteria are that are bad, that are creating the symptoms you're dealing with. So this is not necessarily and often a very good solution to people, although I will say working with a high quality probiotic absolutely has a time and place, but doing this on your own with just a probiotic often doesn't work very well. Thirdly, people are often suggested to go try something like Metamucil or other over-the-counter fiber supplements. And again, this is a typical GI doctor recommendation, okay? I've actually found that most people do worse on fiber products than find them helpful. And this is often because there are underlying dysbiosis, which means there's a lot of bad strains of bacteria overgrowing and inflammation in the gut. So we're kind of back to the whole fiber point in question again, right? And the thing to know about fiber is that it feeds bacteria, period. It's not necessarily going to discriminate between good strains of bacteria and bad strains of bacteria in the gut. So if you've got a lot of bad strains of bacteria that are proliferating and you put a lot of fiber down the tube, that's going to give those guys a lot of substrate to really take off. And it can be very difficult to try to combat and rebalance the gut when you're not dealing with the overgrowth of the bad bacteria in the gut. And so this gets a little complicated, but if the gut environment in and of itself is inflammatory for many reasons, that in and of itself will also favor bad bacteria to overgrow. So whether you take fiber or you don't take fiber, the fact that we're not adjusting the inflammatory state of the microbiome fiber won't really make much of a difference. If anything, it'll make that person worse until we can correct the inflammatory state of the gut microbiome and start to favor the growth of good bacteria. So hopefully that explanation makes a little sense to you. But at the end of the day, because a probiotic deficiency or a fiber deficiency are not the real true contributors to your illness, whether it's IBS, IBD, or autoimmune disease, these first line interventional therapies that GI docs give their patients really just don't work well for people. Next, I often see people come in and they've attempted eating a healthy diet, okay? Almost every client actually I've worked with who was given a diagnosis of IBS especially went home and tried to readjust their diet, make it even healthier to try to get at these symptoms and get them under control on their own. And they would come in and say, you know, after I saw my doctor, I went and I tried to eat even healthier and actually felt like I was no change or worse from doing that. And so I always tell them, look, healthy is very subjective. With all of the mixed nutritional messaging out there and fad diets out there, how do you know that you have a handle on what is truly a healthy way to eat for your body? The reality is that many people struggling with IBS and other gut health issues actually react to healthy foods, sometimes even more than they do processed foods, which is really frustrating. But that also means that a successful dietary approach needs to go beyond just eating quote unquote healthy foods. And then finally, I've noticed a trend of growing advertising around do-it-yourself food sensitivity tests from companies like Everlywell. And just to tell you a quick story, I myself actually fell into this trap in the beginning of my own struggle. I paid one practitioner I saw over $1,000 to run one food sensitivity test, just one. And even though I religiously avoided those foods for 4 months, my symptoms really didn't improve. And then when I went back to follow up with that practitioner, they had nothing more to offer me except that one food sensitivity test. So I felt like I got literally nowhere. I tell you that story just to caution you, not that this is always true for everybody, but I want to caution you on wasting your money on tests like this to try to troubleshoot this yourself, because they really aren't considered the gold standard in determining which foods your body does or doesn't handle well. Therapeutic diets, elimination diets are the gold standard by contrast. And this is quite frankly why I do not use food sensitivity testing with my clients. Not to mention, there are also many anti-nutrient components in fruits, vegetables, and starches that go way beyond FODMAPs that we spoke of earlier that can cause gut symptoms that you cannot measure for on a test. There's no test to run to actually say, here, definitively, this is what you're reacting to. Which is, again, why it's so important to work with a functionally trained nutritionist to help you hone your diet and minimize your gut symptoms. So again, I invite you to drop a yes into the chat if you've already tried one or more of the solutions I just spoke of on this list and you really haven't seen good results with that. And if there's anything else you've tried that comes to mind that you'd like to share with me, by all means, please drop that in the chat. All right, so let's talk about some viable approaches to improving gut and autoimmune conditions. The first one, in my opinion, is bolstering digestive function. So beyond a thorough intake, I like to run comprehensive labs that take a look at how well the GI organs are performing. And if we see any weakness, any deficiencies in those organs, we do really want to support them and target those organs to get back online and perform their digestive function much better. And so once we know where those weaknesses are, we can actually select very specific products to help bolster that as we're working on deeper issues. Some of these strategies actually we can achieve on some level through food, although I would say food-based approaches aren't necessarily quite as therapeutic as supplements, but just to give you an idea and a starting point you can try yourself at home, something like apple cider vinegar is shown to promote healthy stomach acid and to boost stomach acid production. And this is something that a lot of people actually have right in their own kitchen cupboard, or you can easily go out and get at a grocery store. And so if this is something you haven't tried, I would definitely encourage you to give this a go. You could take half a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in like a 6-ounce glass of room temperature water, drink that down 20 minutes before your meal, and then just pay attention to how your stomach feels, to, you know, how things feel for a couple hours after you eat your meal. Now, with any changes like this, I always recommend give it a go for at least a couple weeks, because obviously these are gentle pushes on the body, and just doing it once isn't going to be enough to give you real feedback, but it's definitely a very safe thing you can experiment with on your own to see if you get some improvement in your gut function. The other thing that I will actually often use in certain client cases is something called digestive bitters. And this is something that's been around for ages, used to promote digestion. It's actually a combination of bitter herbs that you can take in a liquid form to help promote the production of digestive fluids. And it works very strongly and specifically on promoting good liver and gallbladder function, actually, but it'll help with all of the upper GI to a certain extent. And so bitters would be a slightly stronger step, or remedy you could try beyond apple cider vinegar. And again, if this is something that you are interested in trying, I would encourage you to reach out to me via email. I'll have my team drop my email in the chat for you so that I can recommend a good bitters product for you. Now, another critical piece of the puzzle for, finding viable solutions to gut dysfunction is actually removing all potential food triggers. And, this kind of gets back to the saying, one man's medicine is another man's poison. And we all kind of know that on some level that, we have different tolerances to different foods, but especially if you're struggling with something like IBS, there are likely certain foods that your body isn't tolerating well that you could be struggling to actually identify on your own. And, following a fad diet or following some sort of prescribed way of eating might have gotten you to a certain point some relief, but then oftentimes people will get to a place and just say, beyond this, I don't know what it is. I'm eating foods. I think they should be okay, but I'm still having these symptoms. So, because there's a lot of different factors that play into food tolerance, and again, often there's underlying hidden infections going on in the gut that are also playing a huge role, it's just really important to work with a trained practitioner who really knows what they're doing when it comes to therapeutic diets and investigating the gut. And part of what I love to do with my clients is help them sort this part out. And actually, once we get the diet right, especially in the beginning, this alone, compared to any other intervention, can lead to very quick and dramatic improvement in symptoms. So after identifying and removing food triggers, the next thing we really want to take into consideration is using therapeutic foods and supplementation to help support the healing of the gut lining. Now, this step has to come after we remove as many stressors as we can, as well as any bad gut bugs, as I call them, so any hidden infections. And so if the body has the right components to rebuild a healthy gut lining, it definitely can and will do so. And just to give you, again, another simple food-based strategy that gets at this principle, one thing you can try is making your own homemade bone broth. Bone broth is awesome. It's rich in gut healing collagen, and it has the amino acid L-glutamine, both of which are needed in significant amounts for the gut lining to repair and heal. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat to an instructional video that I made a few years ago on how to use an Instant Pot to make your own bone broth at home. So I'll give that to you as a little tutorial. And then finally, we really want to consider any toxic exposures that might be contributing to the current problem. So we're kind of back to the toxin piece again. So, sometimes these are things that we've never imagined we've come into contact with or realized that we've been exposed to. Talking about a little bit of my own story, one functional practitioner I saw when I was going through seeing different practitioners in the early part of my struggle believed that I had a bacterial overgrowth in my stomach and actually gave me this herbal protocol to clear that. And as I was doing it, I was getting worse and worse. And I kept saying, like, is this how I should be feeling? Is this normal? And yeah, that's normal. That's normal. And got through the protocol. And I didn't really notice a huge shift in my symptoms. It didn't do a whole lot for me. And, fast forward several years, and I'm now myself a practitioner. I've done more testing on myself. And I realized that the big faux pas that practitioner had made was that she had not done any testing to validate her theory about that bacterial infection she was treating me for, and had actually treated the wrong thing. So I actually understood this after I had done deeper investigation myself and realized I was struggling with toxic mold and fungal colonization, and some other things going on, which can also cause the same symptoms as the bacterial infection she was treating me for. So moral of the story is it's super important to test and not guess when you're trying to give protocols and recommendations. And that's always a principle that I operate from. So again, I'm going to have my team drop a handful of articles in the chat that support the points I was just making on viable approaches to improving gut function. So just to illustrate how important it is to find viable ways to reduce your symptoms versus just relying on quick Band-Aid solutions, I want to tell you about Trisha, who went through my program a number of years ago. She initially came to me with a diagnosis of silent reflux. And in her case, she was experiencing this as nausea, food sensitivities, just feeling like, yeah, certain foods made her feel really gross. And she had tried to address this with medications. She didn't feel like she felt a lot better. She didn't really want to stay on a drug long-term either. And similar to Therese, she didn't have a solution for how to reduce her symptoms through dietary strategy, right? And in addition to that, nobody had ever assessed her upper GI organ function or identified any weaknesses there to support her with. So a key part of the program that I offer is assessing for and supporting digestive weaknesses, which, along with the dietary change, was the missing piece for Trisha to eliminate her reflux symptoms. After going through the program, she said, I was able to find a solution to my longstanding digestive issues through simple diet changes and supplements instead of prescription meds. I was very happy when I started to feel better within 3 days. Courtney gave me lots of options for changing my diet at my own pace. All right, we're at the last question, key question number 3, and that is, how do adverse childhood events, attachment theory, and stress play a role in the development of gut and autoimmune conditions? So when it comes to how conventional medicine looks at this particular piece, it goes to extremes. It'll either ignore it completely and not recognize any kind of mind-body connection whatsoever, or sometimes a patient will go in, meet with their doctor, and be recommended an SSRI medication, which is the go-to antidepressant, anti-anxiety drug to treat their chronic diarrhea or IBS. And that often makes them feel very invalidated, like the doctor's giving them this med because it's just due to anxiety or depression or all in their head. And generally speaking, clients feel very written off by their doctor when this happens. So really, there aren't a lot of therapies and tools for exploring lifestyle factors and thought patterns and those contributions to physical body breakdown in conventional medical settings. But the truth is, this is definitely a big piece of the puzzle from my perspective as a functional practitioner. As of the last 5 years or so, there is an emerging field in functional medicine called psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology. And this is a really long way of saying the study of how the brain perceives stress and its impact on the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system. And so, believe it or not, these systems are intricately connected within the body, and they all have an impact on how the gut behaves. And one of the leading researchers in this field, actually trained originally as a conventional MD, is Gabor Mate. And he actually wrote a book called When the Body Says No. And he talks all about his research with client populations that were struggling with either autoimmune disease or cancer. And he found some very interesting correlations in these populations of people. So for example, he found that in the population struggling with IBS, there were definite connections between either childhood abuse or stress that they perceived due to this perceived need to meet parental expectations, and then developing IBS later in adulthood. He also pulled a study from 1955 that looked at a connection between adults diagnosed with colitis, which is a form of inflammatory bowel disease, with feeling stress or responsibility for their mother's emotional angst or suffering, right? And just generally speaking, the theme throughout his body of research and his book is that, generally speaking, if you look at people who are struggling with autoimmune disease and cancer, there is this connection point on the emotional level that they did seem to lack what's called parental attunement, or feeling as if they didn't have a trusted adult that they could go to help them process their feelings of upset as children, ongoing, right? There was no way to help them work through their pain, their sadness, their difficult emotions. And so, it's interesting just to look at that research and recognize that there's almost always going to be some component of that anytime we're looking at a condition like IBS or autoimmune disease. And I've actually found from my work with clients and my own personal experience that addressing the mind and spirit as part of a natural healing protocol for the gut or for autoimmunity is crucial. And this is why, as part of my own personal routine transformation over time, I went from starting my day with intense aerobic exercise like I used to do when I was training for triathlons to starting it with a 20-minute breathing session instead. So I want to just do a quick poll with you right now. I'd love to have you type a yes in the chat if you struggle with anxiety, whether that's fear and worry around your symptoms or just around any other daily life challenges you might be having outside of your health. Please let me know. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of yeses. So I want to offer you a quick method for dealing with anxiety that I'm hoping is new to you. So this is something you can try right away. And it's called a brain dump notebook. And this is something that you could either carry around or you could keep on your desk at work or at home. And this is also something that you could do within the Notes app of your phone if you're more of a phone-based person. And if you don't like to write or type, you could utilize the text-to-talk feature to do this exercise. But essentially what it involves is just having a go-to object, whether it's your phone or a notebook, to literally brain dump the worry in your head. So when it's happening, catch yourself thinking it and write it down on paper. And part of what this does is it gets it out of the brain and clears up space for the brain to focus on something more productive. But it also, just that process of like literally getting it out is therapeutic and brings down the anxiety and worry. And, this is a tool that I've talked to other different practitioners who utilize the same strategy. And, it's interesting to look at your notebook and see all of these random notes and scribbles, but really, really does make a difference. And I would encourage you to give it a go for at least a week if you haven't tried this. And just pay attention to, do you feel that your anxiety overall is coming down a bit of a notch or two, right? The other tool that I've utilized myself and think is really beneficial is something called morning pages. And this is an exercise that you would theoretically do upon rising in the morning. And that's taking 5 to 10 minutes to do essentially a very similar thing where you're taking all of the thoughts that are in your head. Sometimes people wake up with a lot of running thoughts that create anxiety, and literally write those out in a notebook and set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes. And it's just a stream of consciousness writing exercise that gets it all out on paper. And so what I'll do is I'll have my team drop a link in the chat to the morning pages exercise, which was created by a woman named Julia Cameron. So I invite you to check that out as well. All right, so not everyone who comes to me for help realizes how important learning to regulate the nervous system and tackle self-defeating thoughts and behaviors is. So whether or not my clients realize it, the truth is that almost everybody needs some level of this type of support. And also the truth is that there's always some amount of dysregulated nervous system function underlying chronic illness. So I want to offer you how powerful this type of support can be through Anne's story.
Well, I have hired 3 prior to Courtney, and I guess to put it, long story short, they call themselves a coach, but they did not get me in the game. They didn't act like they really cared at all about what I was doing, or if I had a question. Simply, they really weren't there. And I don't feel that with Courtney. I feel very comfortable with sending her an email, sending her a text, and whatever it is, and she answers me, and she's just so full of knowledge and just down to earth and caring and so smart. That I think one of her initial comments that really drew me to her was that she wanted this to be my last. That was her goal, was for this to be my last coach, and I feel like it will be.
That's so awesome, Anne. And just to kind of go back to something I remember you and I talked about a bit in the beginning. Do you feel like you struggled with other practitioners sort of coming at you and starting you off strong and sort of saying, oh, we'll do all this lab work for you?
Oh,
for
yeah.
example. And then
Yeah.
once that happened, they didn't really have a good comprehensive follow-through program for you, right?
Right, that's it, follow through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so you feel like you're getting more value in that regard this time
Mhm.
around. Awesome,
Right.
awesome. And so if you remember back to that initial consult we did where we went through the nutrition assessment questionnaire and your health history form, and I kind of showed you what was going on with your health and then made recommendations for additional labs based on that. Do you remember what was it about that appointment that you really got value out of and convinced you to go ahead and work with me?
The initial labs, when we went over them, I think it was you saying that it was, my hormones were tanked. And I think I kind of knew that because I was never overweight or had health issues prior to menopause. And so I really, you have so many people talking about calories in, calories out. And I was like, no, that's not the case here. I really didn't think that was the case, even though I'm learning a lot about eating now. But I felt like you had the answers to that issue. You know, and I didn't know what to do about hormones
Yeah, and kind of
at
connect.
all. I didn't know the answer to the hormone deal.
Yeah, so you felt like it painted a picture of how all these different imbalances we found were connected and how there were more than just, it was more about, it went beyond the food you ate. There were other things playing into that dysregulated.
Right.
We could start to
Right.
work that out, right, and get you some progress.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so kind of staying on that same theme, what have been the health gains you've noticed so far in our work together?
I've never been able to see the scale move in the right direction, and I've seen 8 pounds, so it's going in the right direction. And just I wasn't able to get my rings off for the last 3 years, and now I can take them off. So that's doesn't sound like a big thing, but that shows me things are moving in the right direction.
Awesome. And are you noticing just even brain function and your overall quality of life? Are you seeing some gains there as well?
I see lots of gains in so many different ways. That I don't know how to list them right now on the spot, but just even mindfulness, you know, and conversations and being aware of how other people are responding to me and how I have to respond and how I have to be strong to do what I need to do for me.
Yeah. So you feel like you're coming into yourself in a deeper way, right? Coming into a good relationship with yourself as we go on this journey together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
And another thing is, you're not just about the nutrition. You kind of fill in all the other parts of daily life with thinking about habits, you know, habits and mindfulness and structure and just so much more to it. It's awesome.
All right. So when I was developing my program, I didn't want to leave out any aspect of gut healing that I felt was critical. So I built specifically training around learning to regulate the nervous system. And I feel like it's this aspect of Tame Your Gut that is offering clients who haven't responded well to just dietary or supplemental approaches, the skills they finally need to recover their health. So I want to share with you the core principles that my clients learn through working with me that give them a roadmap to getting their health back. The first one is that physical health is connected to mental and emotional health, and regaining physical health requires the willingness to work on emotional health as well. So at the time of my own major gut breakdown, I was working long days and late hours to build my practice as a therapeutic body worker. I was raising my 2-year-old son as a single mom, and I thought I was doing okay. But looking back, I know that there were major stressors before and during that time where my gut really started to break down that absolutely contributed to that. And these were some of the things that I needed to go back and evaluate and assess and address in order to start to fully heal. Secondly, things are not always what they seem. There are often hidden contributing pathogens or factors that are disrupting the body in unexpected ways. So the number one reason my clients say they came to me in the first place is because they weren't able to find a practitioner who helped them identify hidden pathogens and other root causes to their symptoms. I personally had the same struggle at one point on my own healing journey. I actually discovered at one point I was dealing with an infection called small intestinal bacteria overgrowth that I was struggling to clear. And even with the help of antibiotics and herbs, it still took me pursuing much more training and education as a practitioner to finally be able to identify numerous underlying things that were causing the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth not to clear. And these were things like mold toxicity, Lyme disease, and heavy metal toxicity. And for me, this was the critical piece of my healing journey that was missed by other practitioners early on. So understanding these factors gave me a clearer roadmap to follow to regain my own health that I now absolutely incorporate into my work with clients. And then thirdly, your body gives you messages through its symptoms. Listening to and understanding these messages is what leads to true healing. Have you thought about the deeper spiritual and emotional messages your body might be giving you through your physical health struggle? In my case, I grew up the firstborn of 4 kids and based most of my childhood and adulthood identity on performance and achievement. I was the kid who always worked hard to excel, and I was always managing several hobbies and responsibilities all at once. So when I was forced to come face to face with the complexity of my own illness, I had to learn to develop a different relationship with myself that wasn't founded on achievement and performance. And this took commitment to a daily practice of rewiring the brain and regulating my nervous system in order to relate to myself and to my life in a much more positive and adaptive way. And actually, every client I work with has needed at least a little coaching around either an emotional or mental component of their healing journey. And I feel that this is really critical to making progress in regaining health. So let's do a quick recap of everything we've covered so far. We've connected the dots on why fiber, probiotics, and healthy diets alone don't work to resolve IBS and other gut issues. We pointed out the limitations of conventional medicine for recovering your health. We've explained how a functional medicine model is different and gets to the root cause. And I've offered some easy to access food, supplement, and lifestyle strategies you can try right away to start to tame your symptoms. And then I provided insight on the important role of the nervous system in healing the gut. So at this point, I want to ask you, have you gotten value out of this presentation so far? Do you feel like you're going to walk away from this webinar with a few new insights or even some new strategies that you can implement right away to help improve your health? Please let me know. Drop a me or a yes in the chat. I'd love to see that. Great. I'm seeing lots of yeses, lots of me's. That's awesome. I love to see that. So I know that you're going to get off this webinar with some new tips to implement, a lot of new information to mull over. And if you continue to invest your own time in research and trial and error, you're likely going to achieve better results than if you hadn't attended this webinar in a way that most people wouldn't be able to who haven't had access to this information. And if that was your only option, it would be a really good way to go. But what if there was another option? An option that actually allowed us to connect and to talk in depth about your case, what you've tried, and to start to connect the dots on what's actually driving your symptoms. What if I played an active role in helping you get to the bottom of your struggle? I took responsibility for creating a plan for you to help and had a real stake in your success. What if I could actually provide solutions for the specific problems you're facing right now? I want you to think about how much faster would your road to health be if that were the case, if I actually had shortcuts and support systems and training to help support your body to back to health on its own. Again, I want you to drop a yes in the chat if this type of option really appeals to you and you'd love to hear more. Awesome. So what I'd love to do is offer you a complimentary discovery call with me, which is a one-on-one Zoom call to talk through your biggest health struggle, offer you a starting point, and see if I can help you begin the journey to regaining your health through my Tame Your Gut program. So in this Zoom call, my goal is to uncover the top 3 factors that are keeping you stuck in chronic gut or autoimmune dysfunction. And that means you're finally going to be at a place where you can understand what's been holding you back from improving your health, especially if you've never ventured down the path of functional medicine before. I also am going to lay out the most important first steps you can take based off of the discovery call questionnaire and the nutrition assessment questionnaire that I ask you to complete prior to our one-on-one Zoom call. So that means I'm going to help you begin to improve your energy, decrease your bloating and bowel symptoms, develop more food tolerance, and ultimately start to feel like a happier spouse, a happier mom or dad, or a happier grandparent. So normally with my discovery calls, I allot 20 minutes to sit down with a person one-on-one. But as a special thank you for taking the time to join me this afternoon, I'm actually offering an extended discovery call to participants of this webinar to provide you with even more depth and insight on your symptoms and to give you a viable way forward. So I'm going to have my team drop the URL in the chat to go ahead and book your discovery call. When you do that, you're actually going to get access to my online calendar, and I want you to go ahead and pick a spot that works for you. Once you do that, you're automatically going to be sent the following 2 forms, and this is all electronic. These are actually things you can do right from your smartphone. So the first one is a discovery call questionnaire, which will be automatically generated once you book your discovery call. And the second one is called a nutrition assessment questionnaire, which will come by email from a software I use called Whole Life Q. And this is a 300 question questionnaire. It's very in-depth, gives me a lot of really great information on what's going on with you. These are the 2 pieces of information I need from you to provide you with maximum value and input when we sit down to meet. Now, you might be on the fence and wondering if you can continue to just take the tips I've given you this afternoon and kind of dabble with this on your own and just continue to do more research. But I really want to caution you on going down that path. If you don't take action, I want you to ask yourself, could your chronic symptoms become a more serious disease? In my case, I went from IBS to colitis, which is definitely a serious jump in severity, right? If you're using things like coffee, sugar, and energy drinks to kind of band-aid your energy throughout the day, what if you reached a point where those things no longer worked, right? And how many more years would you have to miss out on activities that you used to participate in that you love before your gut struggles started? So you're missing out on things, I know you are, that you used to do that you're going to continue to miss out on without the right support and help. And then lastly, how much longer would you be stuck doing endless Google research, going into your Facebook groups and continuing to ask everybody questions on this and that symptom? And I mean, it's good to have that support, but ultimately it's not the same thing as having a viable strategy from a experienced practitioner who's been down this exact same path personally to help guide you out to a better place on the other side. So you need to book a discovery call if you're looking for a practitioner or a program that assesses multiple body symptoms for root causes, provides you with all of the tools and resources you need to succeed, and doesn't just start you strong, but actually has a process that holds your hand through the entire path, right? I really want to encourage you to jump on this opportunity. My calendar does tend to fill up fast, and I don't want you to miss out on the opportunity, especially for an extended Zoom call versus my typical Zoom call for a discovery call. So click the link in the chat now to book your call. Absolutely do that. All right, at this point, let me just take a look and see if there are any questions that came through from anyone here. So I'm seeing a few questions. So first question is, does insurance cover the cost of the program if I decide I want to do this? And that's a great question. So with functional medicine, the reality is it is 9 times out of 10 an out-of-pocket cost. And part of the reason why is that insurance companies operate under a sickness management model of healthcare, and they're not necessarily, usually most of the time, covering tests that get to root causes of symptoms and issues, because there's no money to be made in curing people or helping people get well. There's a lot of money to be made in giving them endless streams of medications, which is unfortunately the way conventional medicine works. Now, that being said, you might be able to use your health savings account card, if you have one, to pay for all or a portion of the program fees if you decide to move forward with me. And of course, in these cases, I'm always happy to provide receipts. I do that anyhow, even for, out-of-pocket purchases. But I always tell people as a disclaimer, I can't guarantee reimbursement from the HSA companies themselves, but 9 times out of 10, my clients don't have any issues with this in those cases. Other questions here. So how do I complete the labs if I live far away from you? I'm interested in doing this. So the labs are actually labs that I would order that direct ship to your home. And these are labs you could actually do in the comfort of your home. You don't need to schedule an appointment to go see a phlebotomist. They're all labs you can run yourself right at home. And they typically come in mailer boxes that once you've completed the lab, you put it back in the box and just take it to the FedEx or UPS drop box, and it goes right back to the lab. And then the results come to me. And then we go through that as part of the process, as part of the program. So that's no worries at all. Let me just see if there's other questions here. If I've had my gallbladder removed, is this program appropriate for me? Should I book a discovery call? So I would say to that, yes, absolutely, all the more so. So doctors often will take gallbladders out. This is a really common thing I see. I've got a lot of clients who've had their gallbladders removed that have worked with me. The fact is actually your gallbladder is a very important organ that if we can save getting it taken out by a doctor, that's absolutely what we always want to do. But if by chance you've had your gallbladder removed, there is actually very important support that I can offer as a functional medicine practitioner to support the function of that missing gallbladder to improve your overall gut function as part of taming your symptoms that you're struggling with. So don't let that hold you back from booking a discovery call. Other than that, I don't see a lot else for questions here. I just want to say at this point, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. I know I took up a lot of your time. I hope you got a lot of value out of this presentation. I'm seeing some people book some discovery calls already, which is awesome. Even if you decide this isn't the right time to hop on a call with me, no worries. I hope you gained some valuable insight and tidbits from the presentation today. I wish you all the best on your journey, and I definitely encourage you to stay connected with me through my Facebook group, through my newsletter. And for everyone who booked a call, I'm really looking forward to sitting down with you and diving into what's going on in your particular case. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon.